Hello everyone and welcome here Sunday evening to the paddock at Silverstone. JBL, I think it's quite obvious we're in Britain for the British Grand Prix because we were forced to wear high visibility jackets just to come down and talk to you from here, where we've seen Lando Norris win for the first time ever at the British Grand Prix. An emotional Lando Norris, even though he tried to cry and couldn't. You were in the press conference with him. How did he seem when he came in to talk to the media?
Yeah, he was just ecstatic. I mean, he was emotional. He said, I didn't cry, but, I was getting there. I was welling up a little bit. He's so happy. It's like the highlight of his career. He's, won Monaco and he's had so many amazing career milestones, but this is the one that he's been holding out for. He's won 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and I think 6th as well. And now he's, finally done it.
JBL, we talk about it in terms of maybe the wider context of a World Championship bid. It's back-to-back wins now. That will be a big boost for him, especially after the crash in Canada.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot has been said about his mental strength and whether he's able to put together a full championship hunt. And, he comes out of this race in a much better position. He's only 8 points off the championship lead now. It must be said that, and I'm sure we'll get into this in a minute, but Oscar Piastri put in a fantastic race, and in the early downpours, he was so far ahead of everybody else. And then we just reached that tipping point of the safety cars. So one driver made the most of it before then, but it's about who comes out on top afterwards.
Yeah, JBL, you touched on Oscar Piastri there. Obviously given a 10-second penalty for that erratic driving and that erratic braking and the safety car conditions. He wasn't best pleased about it. Emmy even asked potentially if the team might consider swapping him back in front of Lando, but that was not to be really, was it?
Yeah, I think the thing that stood out to me is that he was more dejected than we've ever seen him throughout his entire Formula One career. There was just something today about how he was carrying himself after the race. He was just so unhappy, really angry as well, which, as we've noted many times, that's not in Oscar Piastri's nature. But look, the incident itself, he was going 218 kilometres down to 52, and it was a brake pressure of about 59.2. That's the reason why he got the 10-second penalty. We've spoken to the FIA and everyone agrees it was fair, but for whatever reason he doesn't feel that's the case. But he did concede that asking for team orders wouldn't have been fair to Lando Norris. So I think a tough one for him today, but I'm sure he'll be able to move past it.
Jamie, let's talk about the difference between that and George Russell in Canada, where he wasn't punished for driving behind the safety car. The numbers was different. Essentially, that number is different, isn't it? And that's the only reason. Yeah,
but what I'm struggling to understand is, and we watched this back before we came here to film this.
Thank you, Owen.
Yeah, thank you to our colleague Owen. Piastri did pretty much exactly the same thing on that lap 17/18 restart. He backed the pack up in the same position. Maybe the brake pressure was lower. Obviously, we don't have the numbers for that.
About 30,
it was about 30. Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
About half.
So, okay, there we go. So, but that was quite an interesting point to see because, again, it looked like it was very much in a similar position. And actually, you could see the cars behind Piastri actually backing up a lot more. Nico Hulkenberg, who, again, we'll get onto in a minute, he almost went off. So, maybe. So, he almost went off. So, it was a little bit more congested after that restart. So it was quite interesting to kind of see the two side by side. As Em says, brake pressure not as high. So perhaps that is the sole number behind the FIA. But Andrea Stella said, we don't agree with that. And there's several things that we want to bring to the FIA they're not going to be able to appeal this because it's an in-race penalty, but it's something that he wants them to kind of understand going forward.
It's a case, we just mentioned there, Lando Norris now won 2 races in a row. Still doesn't lead the championship though, because those 2 races, it's been damaged limitation for Oscar Piastri by finishing 2nd, isn't it?
Yeah, just 8 points between them now in the championship. I mean, up to this point, we really haven't seen any sparks fly between them. And I mean, there were no sparks today, but it was interesting in the press conference. Oscar didn't acknowledge Lando at all. He didn't, congratulate him publicly. We saw him go up to him after the race and sort of tap him on the shoulder and say good job. But, he congratulated Nico Hulkenberg, who is, we mentioned we're going to get onto, but could potentially be something we look back on at the end of the season and see sort of a first incident that might, snowball, perhaps.
Timely as well, because Zach Brown was in the team representatives press conference the other day, and he said, look, they'll be friends, they'll be fine, they'll shake hands, they'll fight out on the track, but they'll shake hands at the end of every race and at the end of the championship, may the best man win. Is that a bit pie in the sky? We've seen with teammates before who think they can go, toe to toe and still be okay off the track.
I think so. There's several. We focus on the Senna Prost and the Hamilton-Alonso sort of moments, that sort of thing. But there's another McLaren example where they did fight out on track and shook hands after, which was Prost-Lauda back in 1984. They had a lot of respect for each other, and no, I think it is possible. I think there's a place for Formula One drivers to have that gladiatorial battle on the track, and then off the track, you're people at the end of the day. You're not just sort of racing drivers, and that's where it starts and ends. People are very, very complex. Now we're getting into an existential debate, but I think it's just important to kind of not over-egg the situation. I think there's people that kind of maybe want the situation to be a certain way, because it's more dramatic that way. But ultimately, even as we saw today, Oscar Piastri very, very disappointed. I don't think that he's got it in him to, let's say, be adversarial, and I don't think Lando does either. So I think what Zach says, I think it will eventually shake out like that.
JBL, let's quickly go on to Max Verstappen. We're not going to talk about his potential move to Mercedes, his contract situation, the fact that that's now reversing behind us. But a quick explain, if you could, about that rear wing, why the choices got in pole position but then affected him so badly, it's appeared, during the race.
Well, it's rear grip at this point. So when the track gets a lot more slippery, ultimately you just have less downforce. And so the rear end of the car is just sliding around a lot more.
And we saw that a couple of times, actually, didn't we?
Exactly, and it really, really hurts you in traction zones as well. So, and we saw this a couple of times. So, going through Copse, for example, coming out of Maggots and Beckett's, these were points where Verstappen was really, really struggling, and it just looked that it was really, really flighty, and it takes so much to kind of control that, and it's really, really difficult for him then to not only keep the temperature in his tyres, because let's say the surface is moving around a lot but the carcass isn't, but also you're losing the heat in them as well, because the fronts aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, so you're not getting the turn in. It's just it kind of all snowballs as well, and then towards the end of that stint on his first set of inters, he was just getting a load of wear as well, so it was really, really difficult for him out there, and that's why you just saw that drop off so much after the first stint, and then he just couldn't get it back during the second. Right,
I'm going to make a very British reference here. The Michael Fishes amongst us were watching the skies. That's basically how some teams made use of the tyres, some didn't. Mercedes very much a team that didn't. I spoke to Toto after, George spoke after, and actually quite a nice apt phrase from George. He said, when it rains it pours, in terms of they came in at the start, changed the tyres, was instantly the wrong decision. Toto would have called it a catastrophe of a decision. And then it seemed to just snowball for Mercedes from there. So 10th for George, Kimi Antonelli, another bad race, crashing out. Let's quickly touch on Lewis Hamilton as well. His 12 race run here of podiums comes to an end because he finished 4th. And you were in the pen with Lewis, and he was quite dejected about the whole situation, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. It was sort of an old Lewis Hamilton back in the Mercedes days when, he would be a little bit, iffy in the pen. He was giving us, 1 or 2 word answers, kind of standing far away. Not the best race for him, but definitely seemed like he wanted to kind of step away and figure things out. He didn't really give us too much to work with.
Fair enough, I guess. Let's flip that on its head. Let's not talk about dejection. You've been doing F1 for a few years now. Have you ever sat in a media centre and seen it erupt in applause for a driver finishing third?
Oh, that's a good question. I was thinking that today. I thought this is the first time every single person in this room is happy for, one driver to be scoring P3, as you say.
And it was Nico Hulkenberg of Sauber. And I think, JBL, you don't see it very often, but almost every driver, every team, every member of the media, I can't think of anyone, maybe Lewis, who missed out on the podium, that wouldn't have been happy for Nico Hulkenberg. He's 37 years old, it's the 238th Grand Prix, maiden podium.
I'll be honest, I was really, really happy for him as well. I think, as you said, everybody absolutely erupted, and it was a great moment to be a part of. It's great to kind of finally witness that moment, because he came into Formula One with so much fanfare. He was fantastic in the Junior Series, won the lesser known these days anyway, A1 GP Championship at a very young age, won GP2, an absolute canter, and then for the first part of his Formula One career, just didn't really get the opportunities. He took a while to get up to speed at Williams, got that pole in Brazil, and then found himself out of the seat when the team was in a little bit of financial trouble. Struggled to kind of get a foothold amongst the top teams, was linked with seats like Ferrari and Mercedes, but just never got there. And so he's kind of had to spend his whole career in the midfield. And moving to Sauber, I don't think any of us predicted he would be on the podium at the end of the year. It very much felt,
I certainly didn't.
especially at the start of the year with all the struggles, that he was kind of resigned to a year of basically waiting out and waiting for everything to kind of turn into Audi and everything was going to be nice and all of that sort of thing. But it's turned on its head, and it's credit to the team. Obviously, wet weather helped out today, but it's just credit to the team just doing such a good job.
Yeah. I mean, beyond being a good result for Nico, it's great for the team. How was it for both of you who came down here and spoke to...
Yeah, it's a bit quieter now. This place was bouncing earlier. There was champagne, there were beers, there was music. We've been singing the whole way back down the paddock. We went into the pit lane where they were taking the pictures. It's an incredible atmosphere, and I think that's true. Everyone was delighted for Nico, but these guys as a team have had some tough years. That's their first podium since 2012. Wow. So, you know, a double point score last weekend. We must remember this is, I know there was some luck in it today, but it's also the culmination of some good results, some strong results. They've had some good upgrades. And like you said, that trajectory now towards Audi and the switchover, compared to where we were last season when they weren't scoring points at all. I think they scored points in one race last year. Yeah. Really impressive. And to quote my favourite film of all time, F1 the movie, I think the phrase that they at one point was, they're saying you're not a has-been, you never was. And I think that's harsh on a driver like Hulkenberg. But when you look at the stats and how many Grand Prix, that will mean a lot to him, won't it? When he goes to bed tonight, quite drunken with his Lego trophy, he'll be feeling good, won't he?
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think
What more do you need to
add? He's got a Lego trophy, he's finished third, and he did so expertly.
Right, well, that's it. We're wrapping up at the British Grand Prix just as everyone else is wrapping up around us. We'll be back with good coverage from the Belgian Grand Prix in the coming weeks. Thanks for watching, everyone.